Trench warfare is a type of land warfare using occupied fighting lines consisting largely of trenches, in which troops are significantly protected from the enemy's small arms fire and are substantially sheltered from artillery. The most famous use of trench warfare is the Western Front in World War I. It has become a byword for stalemate, attrition, sieges and futility in conflict. Trench warfare occurred when a revolution in firepower was not matched by similar advances in mobility, resulting in a grueling form of warfare in which the defender held the advantage. On the Western Front in 1914 to 1918, both sides constructed elaborate trench and dugout systems opposing each other along a front, protected from assault by barbed wire. The area between opposing trench lines was fully exposed to artillery fire from both sides. Attacks, even if successful, often sustained severe casualties. The efficacy of trench warfare was effectively ended with the invention and adoption of the tank. Overview. Fieldworks are as old as armies. Roman legions, when in the presence of an enemy, entrenched camps nightly when on the move. In the early modern era they were used to block possible lines of advance. For example, the lines of Stolhofen were built by members of the Grand Alliance at the start of the War of the Spanish Succession, running for about 15 kilometers from Stolhofen on the Rhine to the impenetrable woods on the hills east of Buhl. They played a pivotal role in maneuvering that took place before the Battle of Blenheim. The lines were captured by the French in 1707 and demolished. The French built the 19-kilometer-long lines of Isenberg during the War of the Spanish Succession under the orders of the Duke of Villars in 1706. These were to remain in existence for just over 100 years and were last manned during Napoleon's 100 Days. By 1870 the lines no longer existed, but the two central forts in the towns of Wissembourg and Altenstadt still possessed fortifications that proved useful defensive positions during the Battle of Wissembourg. The French built the lines of Ney plus Ultra during the winter of 1710 to 1711, which have been compared to the trenches of World War I. They ran from Arras to Cambrai and Valenciennes, where they linked up with existing defensive lines fronted by the river Sambre. They were breached in the 1711 campaign season by the Duke of Marlborough through a magnificent piece of maneuvering. During the Peninsular War, the British and Portuguese constructed the lines of Torres Vedras in 1809 and 1810. These proved effective in stopping the French advance on Lisbon. In 1810, nor were fortifications restricted to European powers. Elaborate trench and bunker systems were independently developed by the Maori, who successfully employed them as early as the 1840s to withstand British cannon, muskets, and an experimental poison gas mortar. In the New Zealand Wars, British casualty rates of up to 45%, such as at the Battle of Oarawarri in 1845, proved contemporary firepower was insufficient to dislodge defenders from a trench system. Fieldworks were later employed in the American Civil War, the Paraguayan War, the Second Anglo-Boer War, and the Russo-Japanese War. Fundamentally, as the range and rate of fire of rifled small arms increased, a defender shielded from enemy fire was often able to kill several approaching foes before they closed with his position. This was only made more lethal by the introduction of rapid-firing artillery, exemplified by the French 75, and high-explosive fragmentation rounds. The increases in firepower had outstripped the ability of infantry to cover the ground between firing lines, and the ability of armor to withstand fire. It would take a revolution in mobility to change that. Trench warfare is strongly associated with the First World War of 1914–18, when it was employed on the Western Front from September 1914 until the last weeks of the war. By the end of October 1914, the whole front in Belgium and France had solidified into lines of trenches. As it became clear infantry assaults were futile in the face of artillery fire as well as rapid rifle and machine gun fire, both sides concentrated on breaking up enemy attacks and on protecting their own troops by digging deep into the ground. Trench warfare was also conducted on other fronts, including Italy and Gallipoli. Symbol for the futility of war. Trench warfare has become a powerful symbol of the futility of war. Its images of young men going over the top into a maelstrom of fire leading to near certain death, typified by the first day of the Battle of the Somme or the grinding slaughter in the mud of Passchendaele. To the French, the equivalent is the attrition of the Battle of Verdun, in which the French army suffered 380,000 casualties. Trench warfare is associated with mass slaughter and appalling conditions. Many critics have argued that brave men went to their deaths because of incompetent and narrow-minded commanders who failed to adapt to the new conditions of trench warfare. Class-ridden and backward-looking generals put their faith in the attack, believing superior morale and dash would overcome the weapons and moral inferiority of the defender. British public opinion often repeated the theme that their soldiers were lions led by donkeys. It is easy to find examples of backward and inflexible generals early in World War I. There were failures such as Passchendaele, and Sir Douglas Haig has often been criticised for allowing his battles to continue long after they had lost any purpose other than attrition. Haig's defenders countered that the attrition was necessary in order to cause attrition in the German army. Trench raiding and patrolling led to high casualties. There was an emphasis on seeking breakthroughs, rather than being content with bite-and-hold battles. Yet there were also tactical and technical innovations. The problems of trench warfare were recognized, and attempts were made to address them. Solutions included improvements in artillery, better infantry tactics and the development of tanks. The lessons of the first day of the Somme were learned very quickly, and by 1918 attacks were generally more successful and suffered fewer casualties. In the 100 Days Offensive there was even a return to mobile warfare. The Allies eventually achieved a decisive victory.